The Boston Bruins are currently mired in a 3-game losing streak, and to tee up tonight's game against the San Jose Sharks, and also just to discuss this team's performance in general up to date, I'm joined on today's episode by Scott McLaughlin of WEEI. So let's get into it, shall we?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Bee. Today is Thursday, November 30th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every single day. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Before we get into my chat with Scott McLaughlin of WEEI, a quick reminder that you can find the podcast on social media at LockedNHL Bruins, and you can find me, my dad jokes and hockey thoughts at Ian C. McLaren. And if you are a Spotify listener and Locked On Bruins pops up in your Spotify Wrapped, please feel free to share that and tag me and the podcast on X at LockedNHL Bruins and at Ian C. McLaren. All right, it's kind of a big game-ish for the Bruins tonight. Bit of a let's make a statement game after losing to Columbus the other night. They cannot afford to lose to the San Jose Sharks here on Thursday. The vibes would be the opposite of immaculate. And to discuss Boston's performance to date, their recent swoon, and expectations for the coming season, I'm going to be joined here by Scott McLaughlin of WEEI. So without further ado, let's get to my chat with Scott. All right, I'm happy to be joined once again here on Locked On Boston Bruins by Scott McLaughlin of WEEI, frequent-ish contributor to the podcast, and always great to get his insights, boots on the ground. How are you doing this morning, Scott?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Ian. How are you doing?
No problem. I'm doing all right. I guess it's afternoon now. It's been a busy day so far, and I don't want to say it's a must-win for the Bruins on Thursday, but based on their recent performance, you would think that a loss to the last place San Jose Sharks on home ice tonight would be, not great for the Twitter vibes, at least. Before we get to that, what has been your overall impression of the Bruins so far this season, kind of based on expectations coming into the year in the kind of post-Bergeron, Krejci era that we're in now?
Yeah, well, certainly to start the year, way exceeded anyone's expectations. And it was like, oh my God, are they really doing this again? Like they're just going to crush the league all regular season. And then you get this recent dip where they've lost 3 in a row, 4 of the last 5. And so now the overall record starts to, look a little closer to what you expect. Obviously, I think it's still ahead of where anyone would have anticipated. Right now, they have the second best record in the NHL behind just the New York Rangers. So that's still really good. But, probably more drastic swings than you would have anticipated to get there, where it's so unbelievable out of the gate and they're just winning everything, even when they're not really playing their best. And then it falls off so much where it's not just a 3-game losing streak. It's a 3-game losing streak where you've lost all 3 games by 3 goals. You've given up 17 total goals when defense and goaltending had been so good. So to see it swing that far back the other direction is surprising. I think it's safe to say like they're going to end up somewhere between these two extremes and probably closer to the good side.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my next question. Like, in terms of the recent 3-game losing streak, do you think it's mostly chalking it up to just some regression from what was an unsustainable start? Or is this, I don't think it's kind of the team we saw against Columbus the other night. I don't think that's what we can expect moving forward, but not necessarily the team that was going at a over 800 point percentage either. Like you said, somewhere in between. So it's just kind of natural regression with the goaltending, defensive lapses over the last few games, you think?
A little bit. I do think the Columbus loss was a bit concerning just because that really felt like it should have been the bounce back game. Like
Yeah.
you get the losses to Detroit in the Rangers, and it's like, all right, those are really good teams. Back to back, weird afternoon games. Like, all right, that you can see, but you had Sunday off. You're in Columbus. They're currently have the worst record in the Eastern Conference. Like you should have been able to bounce back with a win there, even without playing your best. And
And
they
they were
just
on the second of a back to back too, I think, right?
right, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so just so that one to me was really like the biggest red flashing light of just like, wow,
Yeah.
that was really awful. Maybe because it's the end of that tough stretch of 6 games in 10 days. Where there are guys who, hey, we just want to get home, get our day off, get our practice day Wednesday, which they hadn't had a practice in 10 days. So like that's probably a factor too. But
Yeah.
that's certainly a game that you would have expected a better effort. And just the breakdowns that they're making are, one, I think they are fixable, but two, like it was 3 straight games of them where it's, just really poor puck management, giving up odd man rushes, giving up seam passes in the D zone,
Yeah.
losing battles down low, like just honestly, like more effort, energy type of stuff than even really like X's and O's and mechanics of it. Like, so that, you know, that's disappointing. But if they get on track here, obviously the home game at San Jose, and then you
Yeah.
get a Saturday night game in Toronto, and then Columbus again. Like, you bounce back, you start playing the right way again, and I think you can easily put these 3 games in the past.
Yeah. And talking about expectations, I think you I always want to say tweeted, but posted this morning that you look at the Leafs and they have, what was the stat you posted about their regulation wins for the Leafs?
Yeah, they only have 5 regulation wins in 20 games, which is pretty crazy. Like it's fewer than Columbus. It's the same amount
Yeah.
as San Jose. Like, and San Jose and Columbus have played a few more games, but still, the Leafs right now are, I think they're third in the division, but they're really getting by
Yeah.
on overtime and shootout wins, which that's not the most sustainable model. Obviously, they do have talent to win when they get in those situations, but they seem to kind of just be hanging on, and
Yeah. That's insane.
especially with all their injuries in defense now too.
Yeah. So hopefully, yeah, they can get a win tonight against the Sharks, and then Toronto again at Columbus next week. And we'll talk more about maybe some changes up front specifically for the Bruins in advance of tonight's game against the Sharks, and some more Bruins talk here with Scott as the podcast continues. On a few occasions here in 2023, I found myself using the Game Time app in order to order tickets for concerts and sporting events. And it is a great app where you can get all the information you need for your next event, including the best price guarantee and views from your seats, so you know what to expect when you arrive to the venue. Their all-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees, and you can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. With the Game Time guarantee, you'll always get the best price, and if you find tickets in the same section at row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed Terms do apply. All right, continuing my conversation here with Scott McLaughlin of WEEI. And I believe, well, first of all, I want to ask you, after that Columbus game, you mentioned the Bruins had only one practice over the last 10 days or so. Were you surprised that they took Tuesday off following that Columbus loss, or were you kind of expecting Jim Montgomery to maybe send a message and say, let's get right back out there and try to fix this?
No, not surprised, because there was travel involved, and they just had this crazy schedule. Not just three games in 4 days, but 6 and 10. I think if they were coming back and maybe playing again Wednesday night, they might have wanted to get in a practice in between. But because you had the 2 days, taking one of them off makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
they do. Really, especially since Montgomery's arrived, they put a lot of stock in like the sports science team and sort of what they recommend in terms of rest and recovery and all that. And so I think while Montgomery, might have some of those instincts of bad game, like let's get on the ice and skate them, he's also well aware of what the science of it all says. And if they're saying like, hey, this point in the schedule, a day off is going to be more beneficial than anything you can do on the ice, he's usually going to listen to that.
That makes sense. They were back on the ice Wednesday after doing their annual shopping trip before Christmas. And it looks like there was some changes to the lines there in practice in advance of tonight's game against San Jose. Talk about what Jim Montgomery's cooking here with the lines looking for tonight anyways.
Yeah, well, up front, it actually wasn't as many changes as I might have expected, because in that Columbus game, he really threw everything into the blender in the second period, and like everyone was on a new line. Wednesday in practice, it was really only one switch from what they were doing, and that was Jake DeBrusk goes up with Zacha and Pastrnak, which is where Marchand was. Marchand ends up with Matt Poitras and Danton Heinen. So, not surprising, because that first line, something had to happen there. Like they had 4 really, pretty rough games in a row, 4 games without a goal for Marchand, Zacha, Pastrnak. Like that's just not what you need from a top line. So totally understand breaking them up and trying to spark Marchand, trying to get Pastrnak and Zacha going again. Obviously, put DeBrusk with Pastrnak, maybe that gets him going. So can potentially get multiple people going. Really with just like 1 or 2 switches. He kept Van Riemsdyk, Coyle, Frederick together, which is, the one line that has been pretty consistently good for them recently. Mm-hmm. And then, he also made a change on defense, putting Hampus Lindholm up with Charlie McAvoy and dropping Grzelcyk down to the second pair with Brandon Carlo, which is certainly interesting, because we almost never see Lindholm and Carlo split up. Like that's kind of become really one of his go-to pairings. Even when, when McAvoy was suspended, like I remember he started Mason Lohrei with Carlo. And then by the end of like the first game, it was back to Lindholm, Carlo, and he had Lohrei elsewhere. So we'll see if he sticks with this. But obviously, Lindholm, McAvoy in theory should be like a truly elite pairing. And I think we've seen both of them have good stretches this season, but maybe not quite get to that ceiling that both of them have.
Right. Yeah, I think, I don't know, just looking at the season as a whole and any kind of concern points, I would say that Lindholm and Jake DeBrusk are probably the 2 that are seen to be kind of underperforming. Talk about Jake DeBrusk first. What do you think is behind his lack of production so far? As a contract year, everybody was kind of thinking he'd push for at least 30 this season, maybe break out even more. Is it just bad luck so far, or is there something that's just not clicking for him these days?
I think it's kind of a combination of a bunch of things. One, obviously, he does have new line mates. He doesn't have Patrice Bergeron as a center anymore. Yep. That certainly takes some adjusting to. By the way, I think we're seeing Brad Marchand trying to adjust to that too. Like he's been quiet recently here. But that's one. 2, there is some bad luck involved. His shooting percentage is, I think, still at a career low. It's like basically half his career average. So that's a factor. Like, he's had some chances that haven't gone in. He's also hit a couple posts that don't even factor into that as a shot on goal. He's not in the first power play unit. That was, he got some production there last year. We saw him, the one game Van Riemsdyk missed. DeBrusk went in there and he did score a goal with that unit, but for the most part, he's been on the second unit, and that basically brings with it about half as much power play time as he had last year. So he's not getting as many opportunities there. He's still getting a lot of ice time. Part of it is he's getting more penalty kill time, which very important to the team, not conducive to putting up more points. So a little bit of all of that. And then there is also, he's just he has to do a little more. Like, you see those last 2 goals he scored in back-to-back games, both of them, he's going right to the net. He's taking the puck to the net, banging away at rebounds. And we probably haven't seen him do that quite enough this year. So, you'd say, hey, look, doing this got you 2 goals. Keep doing it. Like, 1 + 1 = 2. So, so a little bit of a lot of things. I do think he has to play a little better, but it's also worth noting, like, more good things than bad things are happening when he's on the ice. He currently has the best 5-on-5 goal differential of any Bruins forward. So it's not like they're getting caved in or giving up a bunch of goals or anything. He just individually, you'd like to see him scoring more.
Sure, yeah. And maybe, putting him with Pastrnak will help in that way. He can either, charge to the net where Pasta shoots and he can bang in some rebounds, or kind of everybody's focused on Pastrnak and maybe Pasta can get the puck over to him for some easy tap in. So hopefully that will help to get him going a little bit. Just kind of a bigger picture with DeBrusk. The contract thing's hanging over. Do you think he's kind of doing enough to want or to help Don Sweeney push him towards kind of a long-term extension, or what's his outlook with the Bruins, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's mutual interest, but it's sort of in a weird spot right now, because if you're the Bruins and he's not, producing offensively the way he usually does, you have no reason to budge or to go up from whatever their starting point might be. And if you're DeBrusk, you're probably looking at it saying, like, well, I'm not going to sign when I'm at a low point. Like, I would think you probably want to bet on yourself that you're going to get better as the year goes on and increase your value a little bit. So it sort of feels to me like they're probably in a holding pattern right now, just because, either way, like, you're not, it feels like getting something done now is, especially for DeBrusk, is like overreacting to a bad start and maybe not getting what he would really want. So I think they'll probably be waiting a little bit longer, but it will be fascinating to see if and when it gets done and what it looks like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we'll talk more about San Jose here coming up tonight, as well as a couple questions about Matt Poitras here as the podcast continues. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your ride, and you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, finishing off today's chat with Scott McLaughlin of WEEI, and the Bruins hosting the San Jose Sharks tonight. An extremely winnable game, and I don't even want to picture what the the platform formerly known as Twitter would look like if the Bruins were to lose tonight. It's safe to say, though, whatever happens, there won't be any huge, reactionary moves or anything like that. It's kind of all systems go for moving on here. This is pretty much the team as it is for now. Scott, you think?
Yeah, if they were to continue this losing streak or playing poorly, like I'm sure you could see someone get called up at some point. But Jim Montgomery was asked about that on Wednesday. Kind of just about the idea of like, do you mix in someone fresh? And he was like, nah, they're pretty happy with their group right now. Like they think they have the answers within the roster they currently have. But sure, if something continues long enough and you're struggling, yeah, eventually someone could get called up. But right now they have 13 forwards, they like 7 defensemen, obviously the 2 goalies. So I can't imagine any crazy shakeups unless this continues. Say another few games.
One guy I'm still kind of wondering about is Matt Poitras. I went to a Guelph Storm game over the weekend. They're on a 4-game winning streak at the moment. With him back, they could be, something. I know he's already burned the first year of his ELC, but there's that 40-game mark to keep in mind with free agency bumping down from 27 to 26. I keep wondering if they might push that decision back closer to the trade deadline and perhaps maybe free him up to play for Team Canada at the World Juniors, and then maybe decide on his future for this season closer to the trade deadline. If they add, or if there's somebody at the AHL level who they feel might be more NHL playoff ready. Do you think he's locked in for the season, or do you think there's any chance he's sent back?
I think he's most likely locked in. I wouldn't totally rule anything out. We have seen him, obviously, at least production-wise, slow down a little bit. He went 10 games without a goal, and then finally broke out of that. But I think he's still playing pretty well for the most part, though. Like you're still seeing a guy that helps you win games, and he's sort of settled into this. Well, I was gonna say settled into like third line center role, but now he's on a line with Marchand, so maybe you call that the second line. But Coyle and especially Coyle, but Zach as well have played well in front of him. I know Zach has gone a little quiet recently too, but for the most part has been good this season. So I think that takes some pressure off Poitras, where it's like he doesn't have to be the savior. Like he doesn't have to be a top 2 center right now. He can be a bottom 6 center. He can play 12, 14, 15 minutes a night and, be effective in that kind of role. And I think he has been. I think even when him and DeBrusk were together and not really scoring, like all the chances and stuff, Corsi, all that, like was all still in their favor when they were on the ice. So as long as that continues, as long as he's not, a clear negative that's like hurting the team where he really hits a wall and now like he's not holding up. I imagine he'll be around. And the World Junior thing is interesting. Like I think if it were happening right now, the Bruins would probably keep him because I think they want to just keep trying to win games.
Yeah.
But I don't, if they're healthy around that time, like you can slide Morgan Geekie to center. You could probably get by. And that is obviously a great experience for guys, but at the same time, like if he's helping you win, it's hard to let him go. Yeah. And if you're Poitras, I'm sure push comes to shove, like you'd probably rather stay in the NHL and keep, fighting to maintain your spot in the lineup.
The only thing I could see is if like Fabian Lysell gets even hotter than he's been in the AHL, you could, shift Geekie over to center, call up Lysell, who's got a bit more pro experience. But I mean, it's good problems to have for sure. And especially the outlook for the future, a lot of people painting it as pretty gray for the Bruins, but there's pieces there with Poitras, Lorei, Lysell. Do you think they would sacrifice any of those guys if they continue to succeed in an attempt to add maybe a top 6 forward or anything? Or do you think that Don Sweeney is going to be a bit more conservative in this kind of transition year for the Bruins in trades, anyways.
Yeah, I think he'd certainly be really hesitant to give up any of those guys. It would have to be, like a truly elite difference maker.
Yeah.
Just adding in general is going to be tough for the Bruins.
Yeah.
Because of what they've already given up asset wise in terms of picks. It's not really sustainable to just keep doing that. It's really hard to then have impact young players in your pipeline.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think on the other hand, if you're one of the top teams, then you kind of owe it to your group to go for it. So, they certainly could be looking to add something. I think we all kind of look at it and figure, they're probably a top 6 forward short somewhere, whether, most likely on the wing. But if you want to say you could still upgrade center, I'm sure that's where you'd start and look there. Could you use a little more toughness on the blue line? Possibly, usually, depending on what you're looking for there. If it's a third pairing guy, that's usually a little bit cheper. Maybe you're not giving up a primo asset. So
yeah,
I'm sure they'll be poking around. They'll be active because they're going to be there. They're going to be a playoff team, and they're not without faults. So you have to at least be looking around at what's out there.
Yeah, and the Atlantic Division is, I don't know, surprisingly kind of average this season. There's I'd say the Rangers, Panthers. Other than those two, there's not really much in terms of surefire things, I don't think. Well, Toronto, I guess, but it's pretty wide open is what I'm trying to say. So you never know once you get in there, like we saw last year, not to bring that up again, but looking forward to tonight's game, hoping for a lopsided score in Boston's favor, and remind people where they can find your Bruins coverage, Scott.
Yeah, well, on Twitter /X, I'm at SMcLaughlin9. You can read my stuff on WEEI.com and check out the skate podcast from WEEI. That should be anywhere you get your podcasts.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking some time to chat, and I'm sure we'll connect again sometime later on this season.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks again to Scott for joining me. Always great to chat, and I'll be back tomorrow with a full recap of tonight's game against the San Jose Sharks. Definitely hoping for a win and for the Bruins to get back on track here. Next up, do check out the Locked On Sports Today, which is the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. We got you covered from the top sports stories all day long. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Thank you so much again for tuning in today. Subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. And we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, part of the your team every day. Done.